Yes, have a nice day. Today we will say about the principles of the population genetics. In animal genetics is concerned, or the traits. So this is also containing the different type of the traits and the difference between these type of the traits, and also uh, the characteristic features which need to be adapted by the genetic type of the traits. Then the quantitative and qualitative traits in animal genetics and breeding. So it is one of the important thing that the animal genetics and breeding focus on understanding and manipulating the genetic makeup of the animals to improve their performance, productivity, health, and adaptability. So that's the important thing whenever a breed need to be developed. Hence, being a animal geneticians, we should understand what are all the things, especially to be known while following a genetic type of the traits. So here, this field has significantly contributed to the advancement of the livestock, especially the poultry production worldwide. Lot of new breeds have been evolved, and they are performing very well either for the egg or the meat production or the broilers. So, in the context of animal breeding, understanding the distinction between qualitative and quantitative traits is very much essential. And these traits, governed by difference of the genetic mechanisms, and also play a important role in between qualitative and quantitative traits. So they have got a key role in how the breeders select animals for the desired characters, such as maybe the if it's a milk animal, milk production, then it's a meat animal, then also the disease resistance and also the coat color, especially in case of the dogs or the cats. Then there are certain definitions of quantitative and qualitative traits. Then what's a quantitative trait means? These traits are influenced by multiple genes, and each is contributing to a very small effect, and they exhibit the they exhibit the different characteristics. Examples of the quantitative traits include the milk production in case of dairy cattle, growth rate in case of the meat cattle, litter size in case of the pigs, and weight and maturity in the other animals. So, this type of the traits are also influenced by the environment. Then the genetic factors play a important role, and they are a little complex to analyze and predict. So the qualitative traits are certain times they are on the other hand are controlled by one or few genes and follow the Mendelian inheritance pattern. So everyone know what is a Mendelian inheritance pattern and what is the meaning of this particular inheritance is concerned. Then examples include coat color, presence of the horn, blood type, and eye color in case of the dogs and some animals. So these traits are the less influenced by the environment factor, because if a coat color is there, the environment is nothing to do. If a hair color or the eye color, they have nothing to do with the environment, and they stay for the entire animal's life. So we will have the difference between qualitative and quantitative traits. So the main difference between the both are in the genetic control type and the variation they exhibit and the susceptibility to the environmental influences. So the qualitative traits are controlled by many genes, quantitative traits, whereas the qualitative trait, quality, means the hair color, coat, etc. Whereas the quantitative, the muscle mass, etc., are controlled by the multiple genes. Then the variation is continuous in case of quantitative traits, for example, height, weight, etc. Whereas there is a discrete variation in case of the qualitative traits, black versus white. There is no much difference in there. Whereas the measurement of the quantitative traits or numerical scale, quantity, it is total quantity is measured. Whereas the quality cannot be measured in this scale, and they can be classified into distinct categories like black, white, yellow, or sometimes the colors or the structure of the neck or the leg, etc. So they cannot be measured, whereas the quantitative traits can be measured. Inheritance of the quantitative traits is a complex phenomenon. Then it will not going to be as with that of the Mendelian inheritance law. That's the dominant and recessive law. It is not going to affect the quantitative traits. Whereas the qualitative traits are measured, especially if they are in such a way that the environmental influence strongly influenced by the environmental factors, and minimal environmental influences are there, and also the examples are milk yield, growth rate, egg production, etc. So they are all quantitative traits. How much quantity can be measured, how much number of the eggs are laid per day, this can be measured. Whereas the qualitative traits like coat color, it cannot be measured. Its color means either it may be a black or a white, etc. Whereas the presence of the horns is also a quality. So this also cannot be measured. And that is the main difference between the quantitative and qualitative traits. So the use of quantitative traits in animal genetics and breeding is always important because always we require a good production in case of the dairy animal in terms of the milk, and egg production in case of the broilers, meat production, meat production in case of the broilers, egg production in layers, and the body mass of a pig, and also the disease resistant pattern in certain breeds of the animal. So these quantitative traits are of the paramount importance in animal genetics and breeding, and in most livestock species, traits related to the production. Most of the time, we are always saying the production because we do not have any advantage of the color, etc. But the quantity of the material that is produced by these breeds always matters in terms of the economic value. So, such as the growth rate, reproductive efficiency, and milk yield are quantitative in nature. While quantitative in nature, for example, all this can be quantitatively measured by the kg or liters or whatever it may be the metric units. And the following are the key aspects of using quantitative traits. For example, in animal breeding, the number one, the selection based performance. Selection based on the performance. So, performance means the quantitative traits can be selected for based on the observed performance of the animal, often referred to as the phenotype. Pheno means it is the structure of the body, and accordingly we are going to classify. So in animal breeding, selecting individuals with the best phenotypic performance for traits such as the weight gain or milk yield can lead to gradual improvement in the population. And the relationship between the animal's phenotype and genotype is more complex for quantitative traits, but breeders rely on heritability estimates and selection of the individuals. So to make informed decision, because the breeders etc. always they require the profit in terms of any production values. For example, if a hair color of a wool, if a customer wants it is very dark yellow, then they may also grow it. So ultimately, it is the choice of the breeders and also the choice of the individuals who require that particular breed. Some persons may also like the color of a bird, just like the Giriraj and Irani are there. So that's all qualitative traits. So the phenotype and genotype both need to be considered by considering the genetic value of an animal. Whereas the second one is also the breeding value estimation. We need to have certain parameters on the breeding value. So what is this? For a quantitative traits, breeders use genetic evaluation tools are there, then best linear unbiased prediction, best linear unbiased production or BLUP to estimate an animal's breeding value. The genetic potential of the animal is always it is considered. So the estimates usually consider both animals' own performance and the performance of its relatives, providing a more accurate prediction of genetic merit. So it is always assumed and predicted that the inheritance is passed to the offspring, and breeding value estimates are essential in improving traits like the growth rate, number one, number two, the feed efficiency or feed conversion efficiency, and reproductive traits in case of livestock. So, feed efficiency is always an important criteria because 60% of the feed value is there in case of the production of a liter of the milk. Hence, we need to always consider the feed conversion efficiency. And by selecting the animals with superior breeding values, the overall productivity of the herd can be enhanced over generation to generation. Then the third one is to use marker estimated selection, or it's also called as the mass marker associated selection, or else it is called as the mass. Whereas what is a mass means, it is having the advantage with molecular genetics. Breeders can now use DNA markers linked to specific quantitative trait loci, because these are certain loci, these are all certain determining factors which are located on specific loci. So the another thing is the marker assisted selection, or MAS, allows for the identification of animals carrying desirable alleles for complex traits even before the traits are expressed phenotypically. And this technology is particularly useful in traits that are difficult to measure, such as disease resistance or longevity. All these things are there. And for example, in the dairy cattle breeding, UTLs linked to the milk yield, fat content, and disease resistance have been identified and used for accelerating the genetic improvement. And the marker assisted selection, it has got its own valuable tool for the breeders, and it is one of the important tool for the genetics. Then the fourth one is the genomic selection in this particular list. So what is this? A genomic selection goes a step beyond marker assisted selection. So it's a the advanced technology. So here the genome wide markers are there to predict the animal's breeding value always. Animals breeding value. Then so this technique allows breeders to select animals based on their genomic information rather than the waiting for phenotypic data. Hence, genomic selection is particularly useful with long generation interval, such as the cattle, whereas it can be significantly reduce the time required to achieve the genetic progress. So, for example, there is an instance. The implementation of genetic selection in dairy cattle has led to substantial importance in case of milk production, fertility, and disease resistance. Whereas, what is the use of the qualitative traits in animal genetics and breeding? We know already the quantitative traits also play a very important role. Whereas, what is the role of the qualitative traits? So sometimes the animal may have the dark color, black color, yellow color, and sometimes the horn or fold. So how these are going to influence is, so these traits are more frequently the focus of animals breeding program, but qualitative traits also play a crucial role in breeding, particularly for aesthetic and functional purpose only. For example, a cattle used for jallikattu etc. should have a very proper and long horn. Then, particularly for aesthetic and functional purpose. The following are the primary characters for quantitative traits, qualitative in animal genetics and breeding. See, we will see what are all those things. Number one here, the selection for viable traits. So, what are all of those viable traits are? The coat color, the presence of the horns. Always in case of the bullocks or the bulls, the horn does a matter a lot because a long horned abdominal animal, relicar animal, concrete, or sometimes the key, it makes a lot of value to that particular animal. Hence, the viable traits are also important for selection, and these are often selected in breeding programs, whereas aesthetic or breed standard traits are of the importance. So, in case of breed, all these are very much considered. For example, the coat color, then the horn length, then the wither or the texture of the skin. All these are very important for determining and identifying a breed character. Hence, in case of dog breeding, coat color and pattern are critical traits that breeders select for meet breed standards. Suppose a German Shepherd dog and a Doberman dog do differ a lot, and the German Shepherd dogs should always have the long hair, whereas the Doberman dogs should have a short hair with the already very well established colors, maybe a tan brown or brown, etc. So all these are very important in case of determining the genetic trait or phenotypic character of the animal. And in case of cattle, how this plays, the polled trait means absence of the horns is a characteristic thing in case of the Holstein Friesian cattle and have been heavily selected for in some breeds due to the economic and animal welfare benefits. Having polled animal, for example, it's a Jersey or HF animals do not have the long horns, and the dangers that are caused by that horns will be very minimal. Hence, these are required characters in case of a breed. Whereas the breeding for polled cattle eliminates the need for dehorning anytime, and painful procedure often performed in horned cattle to prevent injury to the other animals and handlers. So, suppose an animal do have a very long and sharp horns, it is a natural weapon to that particular animal, but it will use it to hurt the other animals, and sometimes the handlers also, sometimes the workers also. So we have to have a polled breed, and if it is already born with the horns, then dehorning is a painful procedure and not ethically, animal ethics will not permit for such things. And the breed purity and identification is also one of the important criteria for the qualitative traits. So the breeders are characterized by specific qualitative traits, the already told, the coat color, and especially if it is a gill cattle, then it should be brownish red, ear shape, the pendulous ear, which are inherited in a predictable Mendelian fashion. And the black and white coloration of the HF cattle is a very characteristic thing trait, and selecting for this qualitative trait helps the maintain the visual identity of the breed. And Similarly, the poultry breeding, feather color, Giraja feather color, then the Kadaknath etc. black, the comb shape and leg color are often used as the markers for breeding identity. Always the breed purity will be characterized by the qualitative traits, not by the quantitative traits. So the a particular breed of the animal or any other thing may have got the required quantitative characters, but at the same time, the coat color and the horn, etc., also play an important role. We cannot neglect any of this. So, the breed standard is always recognized by the qualitative traits and not the quantitative traits. So the third one, which makes the qualitative traits important, is marker assisted breeding of the qualitative traits. So here marker assisted breeding is not limited to the quantitative trait only, marker assisted, whereas it also depends upon the qualitative traits, whereas we can use the DNA markers to track qualitative traits. Nowadays, we can also estimate the DNA fingerprinting and examine the similarity between the genes of different breeds. So, economically also, it is very important. For example, the coat color in some livestock is linked to disease resistance or heat tolerance, and selecting these traits can have indirect benefits. For example, a cattle is having white color, it absorbs very less heat or the sunlight. Whereas if it is a black cat, black one, then more and more heat absorption and heat and intolerance syndrome may also happen. For example, in case of sheep breeding, the gene responsible for the scrapie disease resistance, PRP, is a qualitative trait that can be selected during DNA markers. So these qualitative traits also play an important role by selection. By selecting the sheep with scrapie resistant genotypes, breeders can reduce the incidence of this fatal disease in their flocks. So, by purchasing itself, a farmer can see that such type of the phenotypic characters I should not purchase, and it will cause a disease, especially in case of my herd. So these are some of the marker assisted breeding for qualitative traits. And another thing is the next point is environmental influence on both of these things, qualitative and quantitative traits. So what is the role of the environment? Of course, it plays a key place, and the distinguished characteristics have been maintained, especially the quantitative traits, its influence on the environment, because these are quantitative, always they are influenced much more by the environment rather than that of the qualitative traits. So, for example, the milk yield, the environment. If it is a heat stress, the milk will be less. And if it is too cold, etc., then also the milk will be less. So it is depending upon the environment. The sunlight, especially in case of birds, the day and light, it also encounters for the production of an egg. For example, the cow's milk production, a quantitative trait, will depend not only on its genetics but also the factors like the feed quality, health status, then also the farm management practices and disease control. For example, the mastitis, if it is suffering from a subclinical arthritis, definitely it will have the low production, and this is one of the important thing that influences the selection of the animal for the breeding. Then apart from this one, the another thing, the qualitative traits is the qualitative traits are particularly they show minimal environmental variation. For example, animal is black, then it will not play an important role in case of the environment. If it is a black color, it will stay for black for entire life and it has nothing to do with that of the environment. It is already predetermined. Then a black coat in case of a cattle is determined by a specific set of the alleles and will not be changed due to the environmental conditions. And this makes the qualitative traits easier to select for breeders do not need to account for environmental variation. Hence, by the phenotypic characteristics itself, we can select the breed of a cattle very easily. And importance of the heritability means it's a key point in both quantitative and qualitative traits. Heritability means flow of the genes from the mother to its offsprings and generation to generation. So it is having the effect on both quantitative and qualitative. Suppose a curve, HF curve is having the black and white patches, then it will be carried out to the next generation irrespective of the environment or the quantitative traits. So heritability estimates range from 0 to 1 with higher values indicating the genetics play a larger role in determining the trait. Whereas in case of the importance of the genetic trait, or especially in case of quantitative traits, heritability for quantitative traits varies very widely. And traits like reproductive efficiency often have low heritability, for example, zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.3, whereas the environmental factors play a significant role, while traits like carcass quality or the milk yield can have moderate to high heritability, like from zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.6. This is the variation. Then the qualitative traits, for example, they have generally have very high heritability, qualitative trait. The coat color, the horns, and also the figure. And it is close to one because they are controlled by a specific set of the genes with minimal environmental influence. And this makes the selection of the qualitative traits straightforward directly, as the phenotype is a direct reflection of a genotype. So when we compare to the quantitative traits, directly it is reflecting the genotype of a particular animal, which always determine the phenotypic appearance of the output. Then there are varieties of the genetic models for the quantitative traits. The number one, several models are there to assist to breed an animal and how these are inherited and how to apply selection pressure effectively. And there are two models are there. One is the additive genetic model. Additive. So in this model, the effect of each gene is additive, means it is go on adding, meaning that the total genetic effect of the trait is the sum of effects of individual gene, means 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So this model is commonly used in predicting breeding values as it assumes that the effect of the genes can be combined to predict the phenotypic character. For traits like milk yield or growth rate, the additive genetic model has been proven very highly effective. Then non-additive genetic models are there. So what are all these things? Non-additive means it includes a dominance, means a dominant interaction between the alleles, dominant and recessive genes on the some locus, and also the epistasis interaction between alleles at different loci. So these effects can complicate the prediction of the quantitative traits, but in some cases, breeders can exploit non-additive effects to improve performance. For instance, hybrid vigor, also known as the heterosis, we have already discussed about lot, especially in case of the heterosis. in case of CV animals. Then also the other characters like fertility rate, the disease resistant pattern are also non-additive interactions between the genes from the different type of the breeds. Then we are in the conclusion stage, understanding the distinction between qualitative and quantitative traits is very critical for animal breeders aiming uh, the improve the genetic population, while quantitative traits such as the milk yield, growth rate are influenced by multiple genes, and many environmental factors are also influencing on the quantitative traits, whereas the qualitative traits are not affected with the environmental factors such as coat color, presence of the horns are controlled by on or few sets of the genes. So the Mendelian inheritance in case of both of these things, qualitative and quantitative type, then there are exceptions are also there. Then the marker assisted selection and genomic selection have enhanced the ability to breeders to select both types of the traits with greater accuracy. So by applying these genetic principles, breeders can make confirmed decisions that lead to the sustained improvement in the livestock performance, health, and the productivity, ultimately benefiting both agriculture industry and also the society in large in terms of the economic contribution and also the GDP of the nation. Then we list certain differences between qualitative and quantitative genetics, whereas the qualitative genetics is the study of the inheritance of these characters which are qualitative in nature, which can be quality. For example, whereas the quantitative here it is the study of inheritance of the difference between the individuals which are of degree rather than kind or quality. So the qualitative characters are follow the discontinuation in case of the environmental effect, whereas the quantitative always have the continuous variation, whereas the inheritance of qualitative characters is controlled by one or two very few number of genes, whereas inheritance of quantitative characters is always influenced by large number of genes, multiple type of the genes, and also the polygenes. Hence, characters are called as the polygenic traits. Always is called as the polygenic traits. Whereas in case of the quantitative, effect of individual gene is so prominent that its presence can be visible in phenotypic character. Simply we can see the phenotypic character and predict the genotype of that particular animal. Whereas the effect of individual uh, gene is very small and not appreciable cumulative effect of all the genes exhibits. So in the character, for which the polygenes are also called as the minor genes. So such type of the terminologies are there in case of the quantitative characters. Then the qualitative cannot be measured. Can you measure how much it is black? No, it is not. It is just quality. You can at least make 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus etc. But we cannot express them as the numerical value like 10%, 5%, etc. It's impossible. So the quantitative traits can be measured exactly, quantified, and metrically. For example, the cow milk can be measured either in liters or in kgs or ml or centimeter liter, etc. And also for the meat, we can also measure it in the kgs or metric tons and quantities of variable traits. So the qualitative traits, how we can measure them is through the chi-square test only. In the statistics, that is the only test how we can measure the quality, means the color, etc. Or else we cannot say that it is so much percent color, etc. Whereas quantitative traits are very well analyzed through several statistical tools like rapid prism and many more SAS, SPSS, etc., with mean variation, standard deviation, standard error of mean, correlation, regression, analysis of variance. All these things can be applicable, especially in case of quantitative traits. Quantitative traits. Then the another difference between the qualitative and quantitative trait, the classical Mendelian phenotype can seen in groups due to the effect of a single gene difference at a given loci. Whereas the classical Mendelian phenomenon cannot be seen in case of the quantitative traits, Mendelian's laws cannot be equated. And this does not influence by the environment. The environmental effect or qualitative traits can be this cannot be evaluated or not affected by the environment. Whether it's a winter or summer or other thing, it remains constant. Whereas the wind kill etc. can change as per the environment etc. Then the qualitative versus quantitative genetics. What is the genetics? Coming to the traits. Now we have come to the genetics. So the qualitative characteristical measurement of the characters, whereas the quantitative is non-biometric. It is non-biometric and sometimes the biometric. So how many number of the genes involved is only one or two type of the genes in case of the qualitative characters, whereas in case of quantitative multiple genes are required. So the effect of the genes in case of the qualitative is very major or minor, whereas the type of variation in the particular type of the gene is discontinuous, continuous, or binomial, or normal. So causes of the variation is always more genetic and genetic environment, especially in case of the qualitative genes. Then method of analysis is by correlation, chi-square, mean variation, and the covariance, and many more methods are available for quantitative genetics. So this is a phenotypic distribution, and to understand the number of subjects, then here the phenotypic variation of quantitative traits is depicted in this picture, and they say that this is the phenotypic distribution will be there. So here the individuals can be classified as benign, intermediate, and severe according to the disease specific. For example, if you take a cancer or any other diabetes or any other disease, so the total number of the quantitative characters, so individuals can be classified. Whereas you can see that extreme phenotypic includes both ends of the normal distribution. Here, the extreme one, it is depicted in the dark blood color. So always it is a dominant type of the recessive type of the character. So this is about the difference between the qualitative and quantitative traits, and please read very well, and I will try to uh, prepare a question paper on this thing and share with you soon. Have a nice day.